Buenos días, vamos continuando con el programa, entonces.
Hello. So we may resume the session, and to avoid any further delays, we're going to start the next panel.
Pero del Comité Científico de la SIBI, pues bueno,
I am a member of the Scientific Committee of the SIBI, and I have the honor to introduce you to my co-chair, Ms. Laguna Goya, who is working at the Institute Carlos III. She's the secretary of this Bioethics Committee in Spain, and she's also the secretary of the Commission of Guarantees for the Granting and Donation of Human Genes of the Institute Carlos III. She's going to give the floor to the first speaker, and then we will have some communications or some Q&A. We should have some time after the presentation by the first speaker for some Q&A.
Tenemos un tiempo más o menos breve, pero tendremos oportunidad de haber participación.
So if you want to participate actively, you will have your chance at the end of the presentation. Good morning to you all. Thank you, Pablo, for the kind introduction. In our panel, the main talk will be given by Ms. Jennifer Mechant. She could not make it, and she has sent a video, a clip. I'm going to tell you about her curriculum vitae. She holds a chair in Political Science, Institute of Political Sciences in Paris. She's member of CERSA, the Center for Studies and Research in Administrative and Political Sciences, and co-founder and coordinator of the research group Law and Humanities. She's also member of the Committee on CRISPR-Cas9, Intervention in Human Genome, National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, United States, 2015-2017, member of the Organizing Committee of the Second International Summit on Human Genome Modification, member of the PAUS Committee since 2017, co-founder and co-chair and member of the Scientific Council of the European Association ARIGE since 2013, member of the Ethics Committee of INSAM, member of Repro Network, University of California, member of a network of the University of Edinburgh and Kent, and many other positions. She has published an endless number of works on genetic editing, among others, World Citizenship Discussion on Genome Editing. Are our genetic personal data really protected? Published by Panorama France and States, Access International Law Review number 2, 2019. Her talk is entitled Public Engagement and Human Heritable Genome Editing.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Merchant. As you know, I would first of all like to thank the organizers of the World Bioethics Conference for inviting me to give this talk today, as well as to allow me to give it virtually, as I would not be able to attend as I had initially thought. So thank you again for your flexibility. Today I'm going to address the topic of public engagement, public consultation in the realm of genome editing. These endeavors that have become frequent over the years involve the active involvement of the public in discussions, decision-making processes, and awareness-building initiatives regarding the use of genome editing technologies such as CRISPR-Cas9 and in various fields, including medicine, agriculture, and conservation. More specifically today, I'm going to be talking to you about the public engagement initiatives in the realm of genome editing through specific examples of France, the UK, and ARIGE, which is an association that Luis Montillo, Hervé Schneivis, and I belong to, all three of us participating in this conference, and our own endeavor in public engagement that we have been working on since our launch in 2018. So what are some of the key aspects of public engagement with genome editing? What do they include before I get into specific examples? The first is education and awareness. Public engagement efforts aim to educate the general public about genome editing technologies and their potential applications. This includes providing accessible information through channels such as public talks, workshops, educational materials, online resources, etc. The second aspect of public engagement is to have it be intertwined with ethical considerations. Discussions around genome editing often involve complex ethical considerations concerning safety, equity, consent, and the potential for unintended consequences. Public engagement processes therefore seek to involve diverse stakeholders in exploring these ethical dimensions and make informed decisions afterwards. The third key aspect of public engagement is dialogue and consultation. This type of activity is meant to facilitate dialogue between scientists, policymakers, ethicists, community representatives, and members of the public. The fourth element, if I may, I'm going very quickly now because I think most of us are aware of the most important elements of public engagement and what their criteria should be, is that of transparency and accountability. Effective public engagement emphasizes transparency in decision-making processes and ensures accountability to the public. We will see in the example that I will be giving you, that in the three examples I will be giving you, that this is probably one of the most important elements of public engagement. The fifth, of course, also as important, is the role of inclusivity and diversity. Public engagement efforts have to strive to bring as much of the diverse public as possible in whatever method they're going to be putting into practice, and I'll say more about that later. The sixth key element of public engagement is the deliberative process as a methodology. Sometimes one can refer to this as participatory democracy, and these initiatives employ the deliberative process, that is to say citizen juries or consensus conferences, to facilitate a discussion and to bring in, again, as many people of diverse backgrounds as possible. And the last key element of public engagement is that it cannot be just a one-shot thing. It has to be, it has to engage into a long-term project and be renewed and be repeated with the aforementioned key criteria included. So overall, public engagement concerning genome editing is essential for fostering responsible innovation, ensure that scientific advances are aligned with societal values and ethics, and continues to promote inclusive decision-making processes that reflect the diverse perspectives and interests of the public. So, a few words before speaking to you of ARIGE's initiative in public engagement. Let me say a few words about the French and the UK examples of public engagement. Our colleague Hervé Schneivis was very clearly involved in the French example, so you might be able to direct questions to him if you have any about that afterwards. And the UK example that I'm going to be speaking to you about had to do with the regulation of mitochondrial transfer. The French initiative was focused on a general public discussion on the revision of the French bioethics law, organized and launched in 2018, les États généraux de la bioéthique. Excuse me. Here we go. So how was it organized in France? There was a series of consensus conferences, and for each consensus conference, something that I mentioned earlier, a representative sample of 25 citizens was chosen using an opinion poll method. These citizens first attended a two weekend seminars, receiving instruction on procedures and issues by a multidisciplinary team of experts chosen by the organizing committee, which was mandated by the French government. The consensus conference then questioned key witnesses known for their expertise in various topics, as well as other major stakeholders. And at the end of this process, each of the 3 groups of citizens drafted a list of recommendations that were going to be communicated to the government as it began its debate on the revision of the French bioethics laws. These recommendations were synthesized into a final report drafted by a philosopher mandated by the government for the task. Now, we can get into the intricacies of these various aspects of the French example, the importance of philosophy as we see it in the National Committee of Ethics consultation. The role of philosophers is an important one, as it is in general in the French educational system and in the French society. The UK's project was on the practice of mitochondrial transfer, as I said earlier. In 2009, a power was introduced into the HFE Act to enable the government to make regulations to allow the use of eggs and embryos in treatment in which the affected mitochondria is replaced by mitochondria from a donor that is free of any DNA disorder. But I know that you all are quite aware of this practice. The HFEA decided to conduct a public consultation which focused on the ethical issues these treatment techniques raise, including whether these techniques should be permitted for use in clinical practices in the UK. It should be noted that this wasn't the first of the UK's experiments in public engagement, public consultation. They had already carried out public consultations, notably a 12-week public debate in 2007 on the creation of hybrid embryos for research purposes. This particular consultation exercise on mitochondrial transfer ran from February 27th to March 21st, 2014, and set out a number of key questions on which responses were invited. These responses were solicited either in public workshops, public debates and forums, and as well a very robust interactive internet site which was set up to receive the responses to the questions that were put to the UK public. To ensure that the consultation received as large an audience as possible, a wide range of organizations were solicited as well. Patient groups, professional bodies, research bodies, genetic interest and faith and community organizations, as well as individuals were alerted and brought into the exercise. The outcome, as you know, led to the consensual acceptance during the consultation and then even regulation and oversight of mitochondrial transfer, which now is practiced in the UK, but not in France, for example. Now on to the ARIGE initiative. ARIGE is an association that I mentioned was launched in 2018, and we are an international and multi-stakeholder association. Our aim and our ambition is to gather as many stakeholders as possible that are interested in the question of research, responsible research and innovation in genome editing. And therefore, we seek to bring together a wide range of stakeholders with a special focus on citizens, patient organizations, and decision makers, so that we can create a forum and a discussion for the socially acceptable development of these techniques. But not only are we interested in mapping out what could be deemed as socially acceptable practices, we are also extremely interested in the governance of genome editing. And we want to make sure that the voices in the association are heard by government regulatory agents, by decision makers, by policy makers. We are also especially concerned with the impact of genome editing on the global south. And in that sense, we have as I was saying, we are not only interested in the governance of genome editing, but we are also interested in bringing in as many stakeholders as possible from the global south. And in that sense, we have not only been thinking and talking about human genome editing, but also crop, plant, and animal editing. At ARIGE, we have a scientific community which was recently renewed, also a very international committee, and that contributes to our debates and follows the different research protocols that are going on, and it reports back to us on scientific aspects more specifically. So we are continually informed by geneticists and by specialists in this area. The status of our membership so far, we have 87 members from 35 countries, and we have 16 institutional members. We have about 150 subscribers to our listserv who follow us on a regular basis. And if you look at the world map of our membership, you can find it on our website. There's a concentration in Europe, certainly, but also there's not very many Americans, and we are to a certain extent pleased that, contrary to having a large American following, we have a very large South American and many African country followings and memberships as well. And this corresponds, again, as I said earlier, to one of our aims, which is to open up the discussion of these issues to places other than the Anglo-American framework, if you will. So what have we done so far? We've held 9 international meetings, and our latest on May 9th, each with a different theme. We have published 6 issues of our newsletter. For each newsletter, we choose one topic. The last one was one that I organized, which was specifically on public engagement and on our particular model, as well as the other examples that we can mention. So we had a launch newsletter when we began, one on gene drive, one on COVID and CRISPR, one on clinical applications of genome editing, all the way up to the last one on public engagement. And our first launching article was in the Transgenic Research Journal, and we were also featured in Nature, Biology, in Science, and in the CRISPR Journal. We've also released 3 statements that have been endorsed by all the members of ARIGE, plus a general common statement with the Association of Responsible Research and the Genetic Writers Guild, which some of you might have heard of or even belong to. We issued, for example, our statement post-2018 when Dr. He presented the birth of Lulu and Nana at the Hong Kong Summit. And last but not least, our scientific council has just circulated a white paper on the ethics of CRISPR gene therapy and the issue of cost and accessibility, which, after consultation by all of the ARIGE members, will be published. So now on to our initiative and the model that we sort of designed. As I said earlier, we are very keen on creating a forum where each person, no matter their professional identity, no matter his or her cultural origin, no matter his or her status as a layperson, a scientist or not, that these people come together and discuss the issues that have to do with genome editing. Now, there's been a lot written on public engagement. I mean, there's a huge, huge literature written on how to do public engagement, what's the best way to do public engagement, what are the different models of public engagement. The literature is enormous. And there are many ways, indeed, to engage with the public as there are citizens in the world, to be quite honest. We quickly became aware of that in our discussions, and we decided that we had to come up with a model for us, for ARIGE, when we wanted to engage in public interaction. A model, if you will, that would be used subsequently either in meetings or in our seminars. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, we do have a seminar, a biannual seminar that is the Albrecht Muller Seminar, which was named as such in honor of one of our founding members who unfortunately passed away. And this seminar is also a means of reaching out to the public on specific issues, but I'll get to that very quickly. We wanted to make sure that this form of our form of public engagement that we were getting involved in had an impact, obviously, and that it wasn't just a bunch of specialists or experts getting around together and talking about these interesting issues of ethics of genome editing without having any impact. And that is definitely something that we were not very much interested in. As you all know, there are plenty of international statements made by bodies of experts with their recommendations, etc., and that really is not our objective. Our objective is, and we of course are still striving for it, is to eventually have some sort of leverage when it comes to decision making, be it on the national, European, or international level. So if you will, we came up with a methodology of how to create a public engagement event, and we apply it to ourselves when we, like I said, have a public meeting, a seminar online, or what have you. And some of the things that we reflect upon before getting to the actual event are the following. the particular points that we must think about before we organize the public engagement event have to do with reflecting on all the various factors that have to be considered and answered, taken into account. And this then leads us to making sense after having reflected upon these factors. It might sound very theoretical, but this helps us prepare from a more practical standpoint the event that we are holding. So we came up with a four-step way of reflecting on the issues that we raise and the questions that we have to ask ourselves, and we apply this four-step method in the following way. The first step that we take is to select a topic, a single topic. We're not going to engage the public. We're not going to get involved in a public engagement event around genome editing in general. We're going to choose something very specific, be it somatic gene editing or heritable genome editing, which of course is the one that leads to the most need for discussion for many of our stakeholders. Many of the people who are interested in getting involved in these discussions is the question of heritable genome editing. So the first thing to do is choose a very specific topic. The second thing to do upstream is to decide beforehand with what community are you going to be engaging with. In other words, are you going to be speaking to high school students? Are you going to be speaking to lay people who are completely unaware of some of these issues and need to be informed upstream? Are you going to be speaking to scientists? Are you going to be speaking to regulators? The whole question of who you're speaking to as well as where you're coming from has to be decided upstream or as well. And above all, if you're going to launch a public engagement event, you must be sure that the community you are addressing wants to discuss with you. There is no point in engaging with any type of community, any type of group of persons who are not interested in the topic. So there has to be this assurance beforehand that you are addressing people who are motivated to listen to you and to get something out of this. The third step is establishing trust. Now, there's a lot of literature on how to establish trust. Indeed, you can imagine defining, first of all, defining upstream what it means to have the trust of somebody is already difficult in itself. But as a third step in our methodology of engaging with the public, it is definitely very important to have this level of trust, especially with the particular community that you're going to speak to. And to do so, the first thing to do within this third step is to eliminate all conflicts of interest, explain very clearly the methodology that you are employing for this public event, and also guarantee that there is transparency in what will come out of the public event, that there will be respect for those who do not want to be repeated, etc., etc. I'm thinking of another public engagement event that I recently partook in, and that also was being supervised by Hervé Schnavis of the French INSERM, and that was the Global Citizens Assembly, which was run by most of the French regional ethics committees on a volunteer basis, and was focused on specifically heritable human genome editing. There was a lot of work upstream to establish the trust with our partners, that is to say the French regional ethics committees, so that was a task unto itself. And then there was a lot of work to be done before the event occurred that had to be established, a lot of trust that had to be established with the French citizens who came voluntarily to give their opinion, to partake, and to interact with this event. And if you want any more details on that, you may ask Hervé. We have completed our part. France has completed its portion. There are other countries are still in the process of doing this. This is supposed to be a global citizens information public event that's going to be mediatized in the near future. The fourth consideration that must be taken into account is what your format is going to be. Obviously, are you going to have to rely on expert communicators, or are you only going to involve interactive back and forth with yourselves and the people you're engaging with? And I think last but not least, I think that it is important so last but not least, and I think that it is important within this framework of the fourth consideration, the fourth step that we elaborated, is to realize that you can engage with the public, not necessarily in a typical workshop, academic, intellectual, citizens jury, public forum type of way. You can also become engaged with the surrounding pop culture, if you will, or the surrounding vectors of communication that we have, such as social media. And that can be a form that can be used, relied upon for transmitting information that needs to be transmitted before there is feedback from the public, etc. And last but not least, and this is of course not the last but not least of the fourth consideration, but it is the hope and the ambition we believe at ARIS of any public event would be to have some sort of leverage and impact on decision making in the short term. And this makes me think of the example in France of Axel Lemaire, a French deputy who strived for public engagement, who really went to a lot of trouble to get into place a public engagement event on La République numérique, and was very much interested in having the feedback from the public be integrated into the bill. And prior to writing the bill on La France numérique, she carried out this public event on the issue of La République numérique, the digital republic, if you will, and much of the feedback she got from the citizens that she engaged with was incorporated into the bill and the ensuing law that passed. So this aspect of really placing emphasis on the leverage that you have with your public and during your event is maybe probably not a fifth step, but one that you should be transversal to all four steps that I've mentioned. In other words, do your best to have the information either passed on in a privileged way to a regulatory person or an agency or a public or a policy maker, or have them be part of your public event. So with that, I will end, and I thank you once again for your flexibility in having me online. And I would like to also say, join ARIS. Thank you.
¿Hay alguna pregunta por el público?
Any questions from the audience, remarks, comments on Jennifer Merchant's presentation? I want to thank you for your contribution, especially because some of the aspects that were mentioned by speakers in the previous session, Hervé and Françoise, the need for us to engage with the public and involve the public, the society, in our decisions, in our events. That's the way to get feedback when we ask the society to share their feedback with us. And the RICH, one of the societies that have been mentioned, is one of the actors that can contribute to it. So, as Jennifer said, I invite all people in the audience to join our association to help us disseminate and convey all these benefits to everyone in the society. Thank you, Luis. More comments? Thank you, Luis. That was very interesting. Well, she made us see the need for us to try and reach a balance, to strike a balance between research and the decision makers, the people who are responsible for making this type of decisions, and also related to the interests of the citizens. And they mentioned the word governance, and this is my proposal, to have open access governance. For example, having this rich association that is striving to promote the responsible use of these genome editing techniques can be a good example of how to strike a balance of these technologies and the reality of the general society. I guess that, well, Jennifer is not here, so we cannot question her now. But since some of these applications have become a reality in assistance medicine, for example, the use on the sickle cell disease, well, we need an ex-ante analysis, and at the same time we are seeing the posteriori analysis. For example, yesterday you talked about accessibility to these treatments. So yes, we are no longer in the research phase, when we respect the primum non nocere principle and the right to information of the person undergoing clinical trial. But since when it moves on to the second stage, the clinical application, we need to remember the primum non nocere principle. We know there are therapies that will provide an obvious improvement to a person, and yet we have to refrain from applying it. There are some legal experts here, and what do you think about this? Not just the legal experts, but everyone. We need to take into account the different circumstances in each country, between countries who prioritize the access to healthcare as opposed to the countries who haven't. For example, in Spain, the right to access to healthcare is not a fundamental right. It is not a fundamental right. Just by being human beings, we're not entitled to have healthcare access. When the Constitution was drafted in Spain, I know the Constitution was drafted too long ago, probably needs some rewriting or rethinking. This non-existence of the fundamental right to the access of healthcare in Spain was very controversial.
Formales de que para su desarrollo necesitaría una.
Of course, if we want to change this, we would need an organic law. In Spain, I know that, but there might be some additional considerations to what states must guarantee or not, just because people are people. Just for the sake of being human. So maybe the consideration of health as a human right, as a fundamental right in Spain, would change this situation, and maybe the use of technologies and the use of genome editing would change this too.
Si no hay más comentarios, vamos a pasar a la mesa. Sí, Isolina, por favor.
Any more questions? Yes, Isolina. Well, since we have time, I want to go along the same line. And it is fundamental to talk about how to make the citizens knowledgeable, how to inform them. And maybe this has to do with the national ethics committees and this kind of associations. As Luis was saying, we might have to play a significant role in conveying this information in a clear and trustworthy way, because that is key. Because sometimes we have half-truths, and I want to talk about something that emerged in José Antonio Salinas' speech. If we look at the numbers, we cannot forget that there is a simpler therapy. Maybe it's not as efficient, but it is less expensive, and many people still don't have access to it. The people who really need it. I'm talking about hydroxyurea. So let's open our minds. Let's just not focus on this, or just on this, because we can really do more to reach everyone, so that all progress really reaches all the population, because there is some bare minimum that need to reach everyone. Yes? When we talk about involving society, we need to involve the patients. In the sickle cell disease, there are some specificities that are not shared by other diseases. So we need to understand the cultural context of the people who have this disease. Otherwise, these therapies are not possible. In Spain, most of the people who have this disease are immigrants with very scarce resources. For example, for them, coming to the hospital means losing a day of work, and for example being admitted to hospital for 1 month at least, and then come for follow-up. So if they don't understand they have a disease, they won't comply with the treatment. And hydroxyurea, sometimes even if it's very cheap, they forget to take it, they forget to buy it. So we really need to go beyond the biological realms, and we really need to get to the cultural aspects of the people who have this disease. And for the market price, when we finally get a market price, well, we need to see whether they can really benefit. For example, for children who are now benefiting from the CAR-T therapies, you know that when they were finally approved in Spain, they were only offered to people who had been living in Spain for at least 2 years.